It's okay. The recording, of course, is started, and we will get that recording out to the Google Classroom. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. We weren't sure what this might look like based on the fact that everybody's schedules are so crazy and everyone is so busy, but we are excited as instructional technology coaches to be able to bring this to you, to bring this format to you, and hopefully share some resources you'll be able to use in your classroom. And I really appreciate some of the other instructional technology coaches that are a part of this grant that joined us today. So I'm going to take just a quick second and put some of our other coach team on the spot. If Erin can pop on and just introduce herself really quickly.
Hi, I'm Erin Warren from Ohio Valley ESC.
Wendy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Wendy Hanaski from East Central Ohio ESC.
Hey, Brant, could you take a second and introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. I am Brant Starkey, and I am from the Jefferson County ESC.
And I am Michelle Carlisle, and I am from the East Central Ohio Educational Service Center. And among the other roles that I have here, this year we received a Remote edX grant to bring instructional technology coaches virtually to our entire service region, which is a partnership of 5 ESCs across the state of Ohio. And with that, our goal was to provide virtual instructional technology coaching to teachers and staff, to the districts and teachers that we serve. And because we were not sure how best to serve each of our teachers, we decided to put on this virtual 2-day workshop. And with that, we hope that you gain information that you can use and enjoy in your classroom. And we hope that you're able to access the things that we've provided for you after the fact. We did choose not to do pre-registration because we were trying to make it as simple as possible, not knowing our audience. So when we do this again, we may change those accesses, the ways you access the trainings a little bit. But for this time, for this series of workshops, we are going to be able to provide them live and then through recordings in the Google Classroom. With that, I just want to ask that you keep your microphones muted unless you have a question. And if you put a question in the chat, or if you raise your hand, if I don't notice it, I know one of my coaches will help me by grabbing those. And if you really need my attention, it's okay to unmute. I don't mind the interruption as all. If you would like more information about scheduling an individual coach session. Oh, Kara, did you have a question? Okay. If you would like more information after any of these sessions today or next Friday, and would like to schedule virtual time with any of our coaching team, there's 7 of us total. You can find that information at the website, https://ecoe.sc/techcoach. That link is also in the SMORE newsletter that you received about this workshop, and on the website of each of our ESCs as well. And if you haven't already done the form, and I do apologize, we had double checked this form as coaches while we were all editors on the form. So I apologize. The very first thing I shared is already not working the way we would want it to. Don't apologize, Kara, it's no big deal. But if you're just joining us and haven't filled out the Google form, you can either scan this barcode, or we'll post that link again in the chat later before we end. That's going to help us do 2 things, kind of keep a track of the engagement that we had, but more importantly, it will help us to be able to mail out your CEUs from the live session. The recorded sessions, you'll be able to reach through the Google Classroom. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the join code for the Google Classroom again here now. So going to classroom.google.com and clicking on join and putting this join code in will get you to where we will be storing all of the workshop links. So there will be a total of 13 individual workshops, 6 today, 7 next Friday. And also in that Google Classroom, you'll find all of the information if you choose to use this workshop series for graduate credit. The graduate credit information for both Ashland University and Muskingum University are already posted in the Google Classroom. Now, one bit of caution, because of sharing the domains, I'm going to let someone in real quick here. Because of sharing the domains is difficult at best, we are going to ask that you, sorry, I'm elevating Wendy and Aaron to co-host. We are going to ask you, when you join the Google Classroom, it's most likely only going to work when you use a personal Gmail. I set up the Google Classroom in my personal Gmail account because even though we've got most domains whitelisted here at the Educational Service Center, it doesn't always work. So with that, you'll probably only be able to join this Google Classroom with a personal Gmail account. Again, you can email one of us if you have any trouble getting into that. Today, we're going to be talking about Google Forms and specifically using Google Forms to choose your own adventure. I don't know, how many of you ever read or really enjoyed Encyclopedia Brown books when you were a kid? I loved going to the library and getting Encyclopedia Brown books because I could control what I was reading. I know, right? They were so exciting and they provided some ownership to that pathway. And I kind of like to be in control anyway, so I would attribute the reason that I like them so much to the fact that I could control it, even though I hadn't written the book. So think of this lesson, this activity, as a way to provide for your students a choose your own pathway adventure, or a way for your students to take some additional ownership in what they're writing and sharing as well. So the goal today is to show you, the teacher, ways to use Google Forms to share information differently to your students. But I also, more importantly, hope that you're able to see how, especially in those grade levels where writing becomes more and more critical, using these tools and these resources to allow your students to use Google Forms to write their own choose your own adventure story as well. All right, and if you're just joining, go ahead and drop your first and last name in the chat just in case. And then before we leave, we will post the Google form for attendance one more time. I know that it doesn't always scroll back up if you're joining to that link as well. So I would like to start by trying a choose your own adventure. So I've got one and I'm going to share it. Now we'll use our voices so that everyone was in the link together. Are you able to read that okay when I blow that up? Can you see? All right. So this is just a quick one I wrote as an example, and I've started my favorite fairy tale. Once upon a time, a little girl stumbled across a fork in the lane of a forest. She was to come straight home, but there was another lane in front of her. As she looked at the lanes in front of her, she followed the lane that takes her home, or she took the lane leading away from her house. All right, I'm going to ask Robin, which way should she choose?
Take the lane away from her house.
She is going to take the lane away from her house. When I click that and scroll down, I'm going to click next. In taking the lane away from her house, she discovered the lane led into a deep, dark section of the woods, one she had not seen before. Denise, can I ask you to pick what she's going to do next?
She came upon a village she had never before visited.
She came upon a village. So I'm going to click next again. Upon seeing this new and strange village, Kara, what's she going to do next?
Approached the first set of store windows with curiosity and peered inside.
All right. Now, I'm going to press submit because that's as far as I got on the story. And it's not graded. It's not a form that needs to be graded or you're going to collect a grade. Now you could, and I will show you an example of that later on here. But for that instance, it just took the reader, the student, on a pathway that allowed them some choice. So with that, the way I think is typically not very linear. So as I go through this today, I want to own the fact that it is difficult for me to think this way. It's difficult for me to use the framework because I think in a circle. I work out from a circle and do all of the branches. This works better if you are a more linear thinker. But I do have 3 different examples of planners that are able to be shared with you so that you may choose something your own, or you may have your own planner too. It's very important though, when you're using Google Forms in this manner, to pre-write or at least frame it out. You may not have to write the whole story, but you do want to have the framework for what actions are a result of the pathway chosen before you move forward. And we're going to jump out of this in just a minute, and we're actually I'm going to open my Google Forms and we're going to do this together. So I will leave the presentation and go out to the actual tool. But before I did that, I wanted to just stay in the slideshow and show you just a few more things. The first is the first choose your own adventure. And I'll blow this up a little bit so that you can see it. This person has used Google Draw as a template. So your first section, then, option 1, option 2, and then moving outward from that. So you can see it's a flow chart, a sideways flow chart model. That may or may not be what works best for you, or it may not be the tool you would like best if you wanted to use for your students. The next one is a more visual flow chart, and wow, did it get small. So it's a Word document and it scrolls down. Again, so think of each question in your Google form, you'll be thinking of it as sections. And you'll use the thought process of adding sections for each pathway or choice you'll be moving along. This is just another example of a template that has already been pre-designed. And then finally, the third one, I think probably if I were doing this with students, just because I enjoy color coding so much, this is probably the template I would use with my student writers. But again, the choice is yours. You may have a tool already in place that you're using with pre-writing in general that just lets them build branches according to your own thought processes. I mean, there's not a right or a wrong way, but the pre-writing is pretty important. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump out into my Google Forms. And I'm not going to take a lot of time to go over each of the individual parts of Google Forms in this training. But if you have questions about certain things in a form, we can try to respond to those while we're doing this. But in the same place you go for everywhere else in your Google Drive, you're going to go to your Waffle or your Navigate tab, and you're going to scroll down until you find Forms. I've already got my forms up, so I'm going to start with a blank form. And when you're thinking about a form, it's typically been a quiz. You're gathering responses. So you will think a little bit differently about that title. So whereas if you were doing this as a quiz, your untitled form would actually be Unit 5 quiz. What you're going to do here in this very first block, this untitled form, that's actually going to be the start of your story. So it's going to be that once upon a time. And then you can continue the story under the form description. So for the first, pardon the noise, I forgot to disable our Slack before we got started because someone had asked me a question right before we started. And so now that dinging and beeping that you're hearing are the individual one-word conversations that are happening on the tech team. I greatly apologize for that. So hopefully that's muted. Back to the form. So as you begin to think about this, the untitled question, You're not asking a question necessarily. You're going to first say in that first section 1, the girl stumbled upon a lane that she had never before seen. Now, you're always going to choose multiple choice for the creation of which pathway they're going to go. And I'll go back, I'll show you why as we build out the section. So option 1 was she followed the lane that took her home. Option 2 was she took the lane that led into the deep, dark forest. Now, over here, your control buttons, obviously you can add another question. That's not what we're going to do here. Even though we think it's a question and our mind goes to, oh, I want to ask the students a new question. Each branch, each pathway you want the students to be able to choose, you need to add a section. Now, some people will take their, and I'm going to hold this up to the camera because this is actually my writing draft. Some people will go through and count. They wrote the story and they had from the first path, choice 1 or choice 2, choice 1 has 2 choices, choice 2 has 2 more choices. So that leads them up to all of the choices possible, leading up to 16 total sections. Some people would go in and add a section. And adding a section in your form, adding a section in the form is the equal sign on your Google form. Now, some people will just go in and they know because they've pre-written and they're linear and their brain works like that. They're going to add all 16 sections and leave them untitled and just keep on at it. Well, my brain doesn't quite work like that. So I typically add the section as I get to it, and then I'll go back and remap it. So for these purposes, section 2 is going to be in following the lane that took her home. She arrived home and her brother wanted to play a game. Or when she got home, she had many chores to do. Now, that goes with she followed the lane that took her home, and we'll map those in just a second. But I also need the section that goes to the lane that led into the deep, dark forest. So I'll just go ahead and put this in section 3, add my multiple choice question. The forest that she didn't recognize. And a tiny village that she had never seen before. So now I've got those sections. But if you look here, section 1 is going to go to the next section. That's fine if you only have one section. That's not what we want this to do. So we want it to be able to go to where it's going next. So when you click back in the question box, so I'm going to click off. Okay, so here you're just seeing the text. When I click inside the box of the question, now I can hold on, I said that wrong. When I click on after, I want to, what? I think my Google's broken. It's not broken, but I want to be able to choose the section, and I want to be able to go to the lane that followed her, took her home. So if I'm going to the lane that followed and took her home, I'm going to click on the one that took her home. So you're going to change those sections, and I'm going to pull up my example. And I'm going to open that. I apologize. I had it ready. So when I'm in here in my favorite fairy tale that I already had typed, I've got my section, then I've added the description, then I've got my quiz or my question. It's multiple choice. And beside each choice, and I'll take myself out so you can clearly see that. Beside each choice, it's letting it drop down into the section already completed. And when I was writing the new one just now, you noticed that did not show up, which is why I jumped back out into the one I knew was already done and working. So my favorite fairy tale that I had pre-written for you to sample, when you click on each of those question sections, if you click on each choice, then beside it, the mapping pops right up. So if I wanted it to go to section 7 upon seeing this never before seen village, that's not what we wanted if she followed the lane home. So each multiple choice option should be mapped to the section that it goes back to. Now, does that make sense? And yes, Kara, thank you. I'm used to it. Kara just said there's these 3 dots that I had written in my Google form, my slideshow, you know, the presentation part, that presentation part where you're a good, well-prepared presenter. In my presenter notes, it reminded everyone, find the 3 dots. And I'm going to take myself out so you can see those. Find the 3 dots. You first have to allow each section of your question to go to section based on answer before it will let you do that. And thank you, Kara, for helping me in this very first presentation remember that I had the notes and then left my notes to be able to do the form live. So here's the one I was writing for you and with you just now. And like Kara said, if you click on this and click on the 3 dots, you first have to choose, go to the section based on the answer. And then each of your sections appear. Thank you very much. I appreciate the teamwork. So as you're building this, this is the way that you'll structure it and build out. And you can just keep going. You don't have to title each section. As you build it for yourself, you'll decide how you want it to look, but you will add a question, multiple choice, with 2 options for each section. Now that is an example of a way to do a story, a choose your own adventure story. But I also, in preparing for this presentation, I also found another way to use it that will allow you to attach quizzes to it. I mean, you could do it with a fairy tale question or, you know, a science fiction. You could still have them choose a pathway and then at a certain point ask them a follow-up question. It just doesn't make as much sense possibly when you're doing just a fictional story. But one of the examples I saw in preparing this, and I'll start another form, was using a choose your own adventure for additional learning. So in this example, he did presidents. And the first question was, which president do you know the most? Abe Lincoln or George Washington? And again, you still want to frame this out. You still want to think about the options. What do you want to teach them first? Do you want them to learn certain things about either of those presidents, no matter if they're doing the pathway or not? So again, we want to go to the section based on the answer, and I'm going to go ahead and add another section, and I'm going to start with Abraham Lincoln. And because of the control that you have in your Google form, you can still you could go and add a picture. Oops. And from your Google image search, obviously these images are able to be used with your students. And so if you did a quick search from Abraham Lincoln, oh, I think I'm going to add that picture. I'm going to insert this picture. I can resize that picture. I could center that picture by clicking on the 3 dots above the image. And I could go back to this question, and I could even add a video. So let's say we wanted them to watch something about Abraham Lincoln. We could embed that video. We'll select that video. We will center it. And let's say we want, after they watch the video and look at the image, let's say we want them to answer a question. Could spell correctly, that would help. Now, I do want this to be graded, and I do want it to get a score, but I still want it to be a choose your own adventure. So now you want to go up to to settings, and make this a quiz. And then you have the same choices in your quiz that you would if you were just using Google Form for an assessment. You can choose correct answers, point values, the responses, all of that. So then when you've got that setting, when you've got quiz turned on, it still is going to be able to be a choose your own. But now in this section, when they choose to learn more about Abraham Lincoln, in section 2, they're seeing the picture of Abraham Lincoln. Then they can watch the short video of Abraham Lincoln. And then before they can go again, they're going to choose which answer is correct, and it will score it if you set that up. So once it's set up as a quiz, then you can allow it to grade each section, and you still are going to go here. And for Abraham Lincoln, you want to go to section 2, it's Abraham Lincoln. And if you go back and you add another section, you do the same thing with George Washington. So it's possible to use the Google form in a choose your own adventure manner and still get some quiz results if you need to or you want to. I'm not saying you should do this for every quiz. Everybody's time is busy. Everybody has so much on your plate. But if you like using Google Forms and you like some quick control of how you want to engage and get information to and from your students, this is just another example. And I thought it was a fun example in terms of getting both, choosing your own examples, choosing your own pathway, and getting a little bit of an assessment as well. Now, I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to stop and I want to see if any of you have any questions that I can address or try to answer this morning. I know I feel a little scattered because I am as prepared as I was. I still realized that when we got started, I was a little more nervous than I expected, so I apologize, but I still hope I've given you some information that you're able to use. So are there any questions that you'd like to ask me right now as we demonstrated this? You can unmute.
Michelle, I thought you did a great job. I'm clicking away, trying to make my own, and I think it went really well.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else? I knew that some people were doing multiple things. I still am so excited that we had so many people join on a Friday while we have kids in school. So it was very encouraging to each of us as coaches. But with that, that was the nuts and bolts of what I wanted to present to you today. That framework of using the Google Forms to be able to create a choose your own story. Now, I am going to be clicking while I'm talking because I did realize I did not share with you the pre-writing links. I showed them to you, but I didn't put those in the chat. So I am going to open my slideshow. If you think of any questions while I'm doing this, please go ahead and just unmute and let me know. But I am going to copy each of these links and put those in the chat right now so that you have access to each of those templates if you would like them. And Ms. Harding, I'm not sure your first name. How do you get to the recordings for today? That's a great question. As soon as I copy these, Shannon, thank you. Shannon, as soon as I copy these 3 links, I will put the Google Classroom share code back into the chat so that you have it again. The Google Classroom is where we're putting all of our class recordings from. There will be a total of 13 of these workshops. There are 6 today, so this one and 5 more. And then 7 next Friday of varying topics. And all of those recordings will be in that Google Classroom. So I'll get these links for you quick, and then I'll put that. These links I'm posting now, again, are those 3 templates that I showed you at the beginning. Now, again, please, everybody has their own brain map and their own pre-writing map. I'm sure you have found or already had a different tool. And correct, Bobby, as I'm copying these, correct. After every live session, the recording link will be generated, and then it will be, I keep posting. Shannon had asked a question and I went to post the link to everyone and it posted back to Shannon. Shannon asked, do you have to be a part of your domain to access these? No. So what we're going to do with the links, the video links, they're coming out of each of our own Zooms. And so when they come out of each of our own Zoom links, they will be set to be able to access to be publicly accessed without a password. So when we put those back up in the Google Classroom, they will likely be in a shared storing link even outside of Zoom. You won't need to be in our domain. To join the Google Classroom, you do need to join with your personal Google email. it won't work. You won't be able to join the Google Classroom with an ESC or a school district Gmail account. And yes, I did share the link. I had not made it public before I shared the links. And I didn't think about that when I was sharing the links. So if you'll copy each of these links before we end the Zoom call, as soon as we're done with this training, I'll go back in and set those forms to public. Just leave those tabs up, if you will. And when you hit refresh, it should let you. But let me make sure I got all 3 of those links for each of you, because as I was copying and pasting them, I didn't realize I was only answering Shannon, because my eyes are bad and the Zoom screen is actually away from my eyes in my own studio. Look at all the excuses I have. So I'm just repasting those links one more time so that you have all 3. Like I said, just start a tab. And as soon as we end this Zoom call, I will go in and make those public so you have access to them. I didn't make them. I'm going to tell you right now, I got them from someone else as I was learning how to do this myself. So we're all sharing the wealth. And the Google Classroom, the join code for the Google Classroom one more time is here. And again, to join the Google Classroom, use a personal Gmail account. This is the join code, ZBIPRIJ. In that Google Classroom, you will find links to or information to register for both graduate credit options. Ashland University, the registration is due by January 28th. The assignment is due by February 28th. Muskingum University graduate credit registration is due as soon as possible, and the assignment is due, I thought she said February 7th. Don't quote me on that. It is already in the Google Classroom. So there's 2 different graduate credit options depending on what better works for you. Both assignments include watching every video or attending live, and then writing a 2-page and submitting a 2-page reflection paper over the sum and total of all 13 sessions. Erin, thank you for posting the attendance link one more time. If you have not already filled out the Google form, marking your attendance and marking which session you attended live, please do that quickly before we leave today. And that's going to help us send out the contact hours for your attendance during this session today. Muskingum, paying by credit card, can it be emailed, not mailed? That is a question for the Muskingum contact, which is Leslie Charles. And her email is leslie.charles@mvesc.org. And her contact information is also in that Google Classroom, or you can reach me after the session off-site. I better put my own email address in here since I didn't put it on the slide. I am Michelle with 1 L at ecoesc.org. And I had a boss. He's at West Muskingum High School now. His name is Ted Harrison. And he remembered that by saying, one of me is more than enough. And that is a very accurate description of me and my personality. But I've always been Michelle with 1 L. And that's how Ted always remembered it. And with that, I hope you've learned something. I hope you didn't feel like this was not what you expected. Come back. The next session at 10 o'clock is Google Workspace, and it's from Laurel Marion, who is out of Gallia-Vinton ESC. We have sessions at 11, 12, 1, and 2 today, and then all week, all day next Friday. Please let us know if you have questions. Please feel free to reach out and email. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording now.